Hi beautiful mamas, and welcome or welcome back to another mother and child card reading for insights and messages about our relationships or situation with our child. And a topic that is coming up very strongly for me this morning and seems to be bouncing around inside of me that I feel quite enthusiastic to explore with you, and that is around sensitivity. Ours, our children, how it is manifesting or playing out in our life. And so we've got the mum collective card. This is 3 of Gabriel, and this is a very abundant card. It speaks of the incoming of prosperity, or the reward of something that we have been working on or planning. And it's saying, there's a permission to be optimistic, that things are aligned. So let's leave that at that and see where it takes us. Can we have a card for our child collective that will take us into the understanding that we need to receive around being sensitive? It feels like 5 of Raphael. Everything happens for a reason. Release regret and embrace the opportunities for happiness. Search for the silver lining. So Raphael also speaks very much to the heart area, to a love area. And the heart's not just about our emotions, the emotions as we feel it once we translate it into words, but it's actually the physical location and the physical feeling, not the name of the feeling, but the actual physical feeling of the energy that resides in our heart. Because whether it's in our heart or in our just below the chest cavity, this part of our body plays a very big role in backing our response or our reaction. And it brings us a lot of information that might not be apparent in our physical world, which in and of itself is speaking to sensitivity here. So let's see where that takes us. I'm going to put these down for a second. I'm going to move our child pack over there. Let's have a look. This is a very interesting card to come up in sensitivity. Yeah. Let me bring, I did pre-shuffle and have some cards ready for our mother pack. Not selected, they came out intuitively. Okay. And we've got Archangel Gabriel again there. Okay, let me move our kiddos aside for a minute. And remember, these are collective readings and timeless readings. So whenever you're finding it, it's the right time for you. And only take what resonates with you. Let this be a conversation between your own higher self or your own intuitive, subtle, ethereal, energetic, whichever way it resonates with you, to connect in with your sensitivity. The first card that's really, or cards that are really drawing my attention down here, is this clinging to the past and the postponement. And I think maybe I'm just feeling that I think our subtle energies, or you know, our unique way of understanding things that give us the experience of maybe picking up on more that is there, or feeling easily triggered by something, may very well have been misunderstood in the past, or misinterpreted in the past, or even in the present. And if there was an inner perception of our sensitivities being a weakness or working against us, or unwanted, unappreciated, or unmet, so therefore misunderstood, that might have caused a level of fear to receive this kind of information, or to think these thoughts, or just not having the opportunity to be information that comes up for us and is allowed to sort of integrate and add to the greater conversation that's going on inside of us. So perhaps this feels more like it's speaking to the wounding that might have occurred around being sensitive or feeling sensitive. Yeah, so an example that's coming up for me is like shyness is often perceived as a sensitivity that inhibits, you know, or limits in some way. And absolutely there are experiences where we wish we could speak out louder, or we wish we felt more confident in the situation, or where we feel that our shyness is holding us back. But then perhaps with a little bit more awareness, or just time passing, we've been able to see that within that space that felt inconfident or felt very limited, we, in the quiet of our silence, in the observation of our silence, we actually pick up a huge amount of information. And so shyness is not necessarily seen as a limitation there, where it's seen actually just as a quality that allows us to give the opportunity for our sensitivity to speak louder. Because if I am confident and I am standing in a group and I'm talking and listening, and you know, there may be information that I'm missing out on and that I'm not picking up on in terms of the subtleties of what's going on around me. Now the situation is positioned as better or worse. It's more having a look at the opportunity that sensitivity can give to us, or what we perceive as our weakness, or our energy that feels easily threatened, you know, or an energy that we feel that we need to protect or hold back from someone, or in certain situations maybe even cover up completely. And so yeah, the beauty of this card over here is speaking to, you know, that there is a window of opportunity, that when we are able to meet our sensitivity, our intuition, our subtle thoughts, our subtle ideals, and our subtle dreams, even if they are, maybe even if they feel a little bit more shadowy, this card is feeling like there's more opportunity to see the color, as well as, you know, the gray and white of the situation. And that's, while the word says postponement, it doesn't feel that, well, for some it might feel quite current, that there's awareness that I'm postponing something really colorful, beautiful, something I really want in my life, because there isn't a feeling of how the subtle energy is actually a strength or is strengthening in the situation. Perhaps it feels a little bit new to come into a situation with confidence. But at the same time, there's this feeling that they're both present. And maybe they're both present in a subtle way, in that we're becoming aware of the opportunities that in the smaller, unique, succinct details of us, whether it's in our nature or our personality, it feels like there's more freedom. So to stay with that previous example of shyness, where starting to feel maybe a little bit of where my shyness has actually been my friend, or where my shyness has opened up opportunities and information. And it's speaking to, if you look at the woman, there's color coming into her garment over here that she's wearing, and the experience of herself is not in an either or anymore. Maybe there's just a simultaneous feeling. And so the feeling of the past being limited is perhaps opening up a little bit more here. And that in itself is subtle energy, being able to be aware gently of perhaps what feels like maybe opposing is a little bit strong, or it feels like your two different sides of the scale are not as extreme anymore, but they come in more into a space where they can be together. And it doesn't feel like in this card where, you know, my head is stuck in confusion and chaos, and I'm not sure, is this doubt or is this intuition, or am I picking up on this feeling in someone else because it triggers something in me, or because I'm being given information in them? And so in this space, trying to put it all into a box, and maybe this box is our logical, rational mind that is excluding the information that our heart and our guts bring through for us, or they all come in through strongly, but trying to make sense of them in this card feels challenging. You know, there isn't clear sight, and it seems with all the mouths that there's quite a lot of conversations or thoughts or beliefs competing, or having their say. But they, some are rainbows, some are words, some are smiles, some are new ideas. It's not necessarily that there's a darkness in it, but there isn't a clear sort of order of how the subtleties fit together, or how they blend in with the dominant information going through my thoughts. And so the subtlety or the sensitivities, so here we are with our guiding messages, is that the focus in this reading seems to be pointing to the life skill or the master lesson, of our own awareness and our own capacity. Subtle information is what feeds awareness, as well as blatant information. As in, I've read something on the topic and it has brought awareness in. But the deeper level of awareness, which is specific to you because of the blend of your subtle energy and the information that you gather in your sensitive body or in your sensitive perception, is integrating and can integrate in a way that literally brings a new perspective. Because up here, these cards are very positive and speaking of being optimistic of, the next step, and it's prosperous. So it doesn't feel like a person who's coming in just with a good plan or just with the resources to do it, but with that smorgasbord or tray of all the sensitive energies that we pick up in our awareness when we just attuned in that space. And awareness is always amplified when we come into presence with ourselves. And it feels like the awareness of really being able to meet your sensitivity with a space of curiosity. So it's not about, cultural programming or what is allowed or what isn't allowed, what is right or wrong or anything like that. Or it's not necessarily about how am I going to apply it into my physical world, but it's actually more of a getting to know and an understanding of the nuances of your energy and how they work together, not to achieve anything or not to heal anything, but it's in more of a space where you meeting them, kind of feeling them where they are at now. Yeah, because there's such a beautiful feeling of, and with the card of protection too. There's such a beautiful feeling of where our subtlety is, or our sensitivities are actually the calm in the center of it all. But also it's the place where it feels that you're able to connect with, you see the water coming down and the light coming down from above, but it's, within this coat there's illumination. So it's speaking to the realness and the liveness and the calmness and the wisdom, just to the presence of the inner self. And with the message of that you protected, it's strengthening that sense of vulnerability that we feel when we look at new information or when we are connecting with something quite different to what we thought it was in the past, or something that is emerging, something that's come into color. And there's a period of time, particularly with our sensitive energy, where we actually just meeting it and greeting it and getting to know it before we decide in how it's going to help us either fix our past or create our future or color us in. It feels like a very peaceful space of meeting what is there, and maybe meeting what has always been within us from a new perspective. It does feel for many of you that this isn't a brand new awareness, like a shock. It feels like something that you've been able to look at. And while in this card it feels like there's a frame about it and a separation, there's also the realization that, who we are is coloring it in, is starting to wear it a little bit more. And so, it's not separate in the sense of not really understanding it or being aware of it. It feels like it's integrating a little bit more. And with the Archangel Gabriel, who's our wand, our word is our wand, how we feel about ourselves. It's about communication. It's about releasing our insecurities. And the insecurities around our sensitivity that may have been mocked. It might have been perceived as naive, instead of in the truth of innocence, which is a very stable wisdom, which is more of a connection with the purity of an information that we receive in. So, as an example here, if you meet someone who appears in a certain way very convincingly, but yet within there's an awareness of something being off, or something, a different agenda maybe. What this message feels like is there's almost like a strengthening in not necessarily feeling it as contrasting, in that I need to pick one. This person's either who they are presenting themselves as, or they are actually this underlying agenda that I'm picking up on. And then another element of it is how I speak to myself about the fact that I've picked up on this hidden agenda or different communication in a person who's appearing very differently. And so I think there's an incredibly beautiful, clear message here that is speaking to maybe a maturity or an expansion of being able to connect with, meet, and invite our subtle energy, which in this space of awareness and in this space of presence, the subtle energy and the intuitive energy stops being vague, and that's where the insecurity starts dissolving away. And if you're not quite at that point yet, the message here is definitely saying that you are protected and it's safe for you to explore how perhaps stuff from the past that injured this sensitive communication, or the sensitivity within our personalities, that now is a time and an opportunity for it to feel strengthened, for it to feel more that it's contributing towards a stable conversation instead of understanding that feels conflicted. Okay, so I'm going to leave our mother read in there for now. Let me see. Then we're going to take a little look into the collective child experience. And so I've been working with children, particularly children who are, who have gone through, who are unattached in the sense that I've worked a lot with vulnerable children, with abandoned children and abused children, but then also worked a lot with children who are in like the schooling area, what we would say, they're healthy for all intents and purposes. They've come from a family that has experienced more stability and, but what's been interesting for me is over the years, what both, let me call it groups of children, okay, so whether children have come from a fairly stable upbringing or a completely unstable upbringing, is that closer than that, there is a lot more expression of, a lot more connection with, and definitely a more vocal, collective conversation about the sensitivities of our children. And some sensitivities are obviously experienced in disorder, and some are experienced artistically, or let me pull some more cards, because I can feel like a very different energy of sensitivity here. And why I'm feeling it, well, as I'm feeling it, what I'm feeling with it is almost the different generation, or the opportunity that our child generation might have, or might have been speaking to us about with regards to sensitivity, is the fact that there is sensitivity is a lot more prominent. Let me say it that way. And you know, whether we are perceiving it in our children's behavior or their play or their ability to be functioning in systems that maybe are a little bit insensitive, or excuse me, or haven't matured enough to perceive their sensitivity and respond to their sensitivity. But also on the other side, the presence of a lot more educators and parents and health professionals being aware that their sensitivities are telling us a much broader picture, perhaps, than what the collective conversation was 30 or 40 or 50, whatever, years ago. So can we have some more information around the collective of our children's sensitive behavior? So I keep on hearing, whenever I connect with the energy of sensitive, I also feel that feeling of trigger, you know. And in psychology, we tend to see behavior that triggers us as something that is scratching on an old wound. Whereas here, the feeling I'm having is quite different, in where our sensitivity and our triggers kind of speak to each other. Yeah, and what that conversation is. Let's get some more cards. We've got the possibility, harmony. Can we have one more? Well, that one seems to want to come out. Let's see what we hearing. Beautiful. Okay. Feel like we'll take the top. We're gonna shuffle. I was thinking of taking the top two cards, but they didn't feel that they were right. So let's have two more cards for our child, collective, and it's interesting. Okay, let's get into our reading. Right, can we see everything here? Everything. I might just move our mum cards a little bit off our view so that we can see our chillins and connecting here. Okay, beautiful. So the first card that we drew for our children kind of has this sort of, it feels like it's tempoing a potential reaction or a potential situation that is sort of saying, like, let's move away from the chaos of whether it was right or wrong or good and bad and what does it mean or anything, and let's sort of bring ourselves into a space of you know, just being. And maybe it's a similar feeling with that awareness, but it feels slightly different in the child energy here, because it feels more like reassurance. It feels more like saying, hey, let's, you know, I know that is a horrible feeling, you know, because how the sensitivity over here, it feels like our sensitivity when we're exploring it is more about how my inner self and my personality or my identity that I show the world, you know, it felt like that kind of a relationship. Whereas in our child energy here, it feels very much like I can feel the group looking at me. You know, I can feel the social perception of me is playing quite a big role, and that might be true for some of our children. But I mean, it does make sense whether it's an actual experience that some of our children are going through, or whether it's a very general sense of where, you know, just the position of a child. We are so under the influence of our... Oh, sorry, let me just pause a sec. Sorry about that interruption. So as a child, we are vulnerable or influenced by our environmental interpretation of our behavior, which, as you can imagine, in a class or a school or a you know, a younger environment, it's sometimes the feeling is sometimes it can be harsh. Sometimes, like, our greatest characteristic or, you know, talent might be something that we feel we need to hide or pull away from, or isn't appreciated by our social group or understood by the people we surround ourselves by. But also there's another energy of the clash between when I'm feeling something and something feels true and right, or that I'm understanding on the inside, and then having someone on the outside receive or perceive or express feedback on a very different level, so quite removed from how I'm experiencing it inside. And so there's the feeling over here of dissonance is more the feeling of, like, you know, the position that you're in mentally, physically, emotionally, all of those things as a child, and the feedback that you've been given from your environment, and the potential confusion or misguided protection that we put around energies, because we can't really appreciate how our uniqueness or the information that we can connect with and are processing, we just basically haven't had enough experience on whether we can trust it or not. So that's kind of the feeling there. Archangel Uriel's coming out for me here, because there's these two cards just actually feel like they are reassurance. They're reassuring this energy, these little beings, that it's kind of the learning process, you know, where we realize that a weakness is actually a strength, or we have an idea where we can be like, oh, you know, we might be feeling incredibly anxious because we are doing a presentation or a show on stage, and then we receive like a standing ovation or a loud clap that we weren't really expecting, you know. So that kind of energy is coming up here, where there's a sense of perhaps where our kids have felt misunderstood, or the need to hide away something that was subtle, but a energy that they feel strong in the inside. Feels like there's message in here around the reassurance that the ability to see it in the way that it strengthens, or for it to be seen and experienced as its strength, is there. And this card is also just reminding, once again, in the learning process, of the patience and the faith which our children often battle with, because they're children and they're in, you know, an ego and identity developing part of their journey, whereas as adults we in the part of our journey where we're actually undoing the ego and the identity that we developed in our youth, you know, and that's a part of our learning experience. So they're still making theirs. Their questions of you know, who I am, what does this mean to the world, and do I belong? That's developing still, and that is sort of the space in their mind that they are able to receive and integrate their energy. So this girl over here seems to be like looking into a mirror, and it's making me think of speaking to, you know, those of us who have children who okay, so let's speak generally about highly sensitive children, in that often they don't like to be rushed, and it's not because it's not coming from a personality or you know, trying to assert their authority and be in charge of the situation. In a highly sensitive space, it's coming from the preference, you know, they're receiving a lot of information, they're very tuned into the space of now, and they like to do things in a slower, more orderly way, and are kind of more able to hear something if it's spoken in a tone that isn't extreme, you know, where we're able to give more of a observational perspective and a learning perspective than a perspective that is heavily loaded on the consequence of such behavior, the need for the forethought. So it's almost like we open up the space for whatever sensitivity they were feeling to be included in the conversation. And sometimes it is still the same word. So instead of it being like, what were you thinking? More in a tone of, okay, so what were you thinking? What led you in that way? What, you know, influenced that decision? And so there's more space there for our child to speak to the subtle stuff coming through, or the intuitive stuff coming through, and not just feel that they need to defend themselves and explain themselves from a perspective of wrong and right, or the instruction I received, which was very clear, but the information I felt inside of me when I heard that instruction, you know, and how do I communicate that back in a situation so that it doesn't lead to this sort of harsh space of feeling that we're against each other and something wrong has happened. Yeah. So with the patience and faith, and, you know, the possibility of perhaps even assisting our children to see things that they think work against them in a new light, you know. Our younger kids, or I mean even our older kids, will say something like, you know, they'll express their impatience or their anger towards themselves because they see something as a deficit, you know. Why does this take me so long to understand? Or, you know, why is my sleep interrupted by my sensitivity to the other energies that are going on in the bigger world? You know, when our children can, because, you know, it's not relegating them into a sense of, oh, has my child been born psychic, or, you know, with the ability to remember past lives, or have some kind of savant understanding or ability in them. It's not only about that, though that is very much included. This feels like it's, the possibility is twofold, you know. Keeping the space open so perhaps you and your child can see their sensitivities in a more balanced light, you know, by being able to kind of help them explore something that they feel is definitely a deficit, you know, whether it's like realizing that they can't really go into shopping centers or be at concerts and crowds and stuff like that because they find that area, that environment, very overstimulating, because they are so connected into the collective energy, you know. And this may also include if you able to, or if you want to explore, and how we teach our children to manage their energy. You know, if they're feeling really overwhelmed or overstimulated, giving them like a little activity they can do within, or a little technique they can do within, that helps them soothe their nervous system from going into you know, high anxiety about it, and helping them to stay connected or in a position where they're able to receive their sensitivity in not such an overwhelming way, and appreciate like the parts of them. You know, sometimes it's not necessarily speaking about the sensitivity as such, but sometimes it's placing it. I'm thinking now of an example with one kid who he very much had a feeling like of not belonging in any situation, which when just in a conversation we're having one day, we're speaking about being introverted and extroverted, and that's, you know, it's not, an introvert is not necessarily someone who wants to lock themselves at home and, you know, that's where they want to stay. But it may be someone who does like to socialize, but after a while they feel, okay, I've had enough now and I need to remove myself, otherwise it starts becoming too overwhelming for me. Because sometimes I'm so tuned into what's going on around me, and it doesn't feel harmonious, and it doesn't feel that I have a sense of, yeah, it doesn't feel nice anymore. It's starting to feel not so nice. Yeah, also kind of seeing these dolphins as, you know, they've jumped out of the water and they're coming up for a breath of fresh air. And so, you know, the harmony that dolphins swim underwater, but they need to come up for air. I may feel things very collectively, but I need to withdraw sometimes. And it's not because I'm scared of people, but in an introvert kind of a way. There's definitely a rhythm to my energy that I like to be out and a part of, but then I kind of come back inwards and I restore. And that's more about the nature of me and how my sensitivity works, and not necessarily, I'm not necessarily alone in that. So this little boy that I was speaking to him, he felt so satisfied that there were a whole group in the world, many people out there who were introverted, and that he wasn't alone. And, you know, from that space, because he was a little bit older, he was at 9, 10, he started working more with himself in harmony, where he felt more confident to say, oh, I'm not ready to come to that party yet, or okay, I think I've had enough now and I want to step away a bit, you know, or I want to go home completely, you know, and not necessarily seeing that feeling of pulling away from the social group or the activity as feeling abandoned or feeling alone or feeling like there's something wrong, because if I'm not belonging all the time and I'm missing out, then the group's not going to accept me, you know. And so just that curious little perspective for him just helped him to be more harmonious with his own inner sense of guidance, and you know, to engage in it more and to actually ask the question instead of coming with a very pressurized expectation of, you know, I must stay at the party till the end, or you know, my brother wants to go to this very busy market and I want to be with him, but I know that I don't feel great when I'm at that market, you know. So I think the message that is coming through really beautiful, or the perspectives that's coming through from our child group, is really speaking to allowing the integration of the subtle and the concrete, and helping our kids, whichever age they're at, to find that harmony for them between their head and their heart, between their outside world and their inside world. And instead of feeling a pressure to adapt, there's a lot of healing energy and support around here that is saying, you know, we are supporting the space of the sensitivities, feeling that they aren't in the extreme of strength and weaknesses, and it's a more holistic sort of feeling that's allowed to come through here for our children, which brings emotional healing, you know, and it helps them develop an appreciation or a sense of kindness within themselves, or maybe even a curiosity for their quirkiness, or for the sensitivity that comes out of them, you know, especially when it feels like it's not something that needs to be hidden or covered up, or, you know, something that brings regret over here. This card is saying, like, let's start bringing in the silver linings to things that feel that they work against us, you know. But overall it feels like there's opportunities here that there's opportunities here for this to be healing and integrative, rather than needing to separate them out and solve problems. And one last thing is, so even if something, say now, a sensitivity is coming up in a very disruptive way, or a way that is going to attract consequences or separation from the group for the kid, okay? Because they now, part of their sensitivity is they startle easily. So as a result, they shout out a lot and either give other people fright or interrupt the class, or you know, being able to help them like empathize. Okay, what's this? It's such a nice feeling. Even something that is maybe being rejected, or there's a lot of feedback of, you've got to work on this, it's a problem that is connected with their sensitivity, helping them to see the underlying language there, you know, and helping them to convert that into something that works easier. So if I know that I startle quick, all right, and that can be quite reactive, but it's something that is upsetting, you know, in my day, or it's upsetting certain situations, being able to sort of hold that in a space where, okay, I startle very easily. Okay, so what this tells me about me is there's a part of me that is actually hearing things on higher volume, you know, and I know that about myself. And I know that in certain situations, like if I just scream out loud, you know, while the class is writing a test, you know, that works against me. But it's not to have a go at the actual sensitivity or the sensitive understanding in itself. It's more to be able to see, sometimes this is very helpful to have, and sometimes it's not so helpful to have. So when it's not helpful, let me, you know, get some support on what I can do to have more of a feeling that I can control the volume of my sensitivity, rather than I'm just at the, I know there's a nice word for it, but basically that my sensitivity works against me. You know, like I'm a victim of it. So let's see, is there any message that the child collective, or guidance and advice that the child collective would like to give the mother around how they are experiencing sensitivity, or how they would, what they need most at the moment. Is there any guidance and advice from the child collective for the mother collective on how they can be received? So I'm actually seeing 3 cards here. Let's do it like that. Wow, and this is all speaking to that subtle and sensitive and light, soul, energetic energy of us. Right. So as these 3 coming together are really speaking to, they're giving almost subtle advice around your sensitivity of, our sensitivities or our subtle energy and information and nuances that we are picking up on are louder or more apparent when we are present. And when we are present in an open space, it's not like, okay, I've asked the question, what's going on with my child, I need to know what his sensitivities are, now I'm going to be quiet for a little bit and I want the answer, It's coming more from the more attuned we are in our own presence and our own subtle energy, the more understanding and teaching, being able to teach our child. So this is, you're a spiritual teacher. Take it out of any religious connotation and see like spirit as more the unseen, the space between us, and understanding the connections and the conversations and the relations that are going on in that space. And so what the advice is here is that you being present and connected in that moment, or more and more throughout your day, or recognizing that you are actually very present. And when you are in the now, your subtle information is giving you a lot of, is making you sensitive to the bigger picture of what's going on for your kid. And within that is your ability to speak to it in a informed, whole way, and not just the behavior that we saw, the scenario that we've been fed. And to be able to connect in there, to feel if, your child is needing correction or guidance, or the opportunity to look at their situation optimistically or empathically, compassionately. And so very succinctly, the message is, trust yourself. Trust yourself not to need to know exactly what is going on what the answer is, or that you don't need to have the premeditated conversation prepared inside of your head, to allow the freedom of, even if something is very emotional and unraveling or very annoying or getting a lot of pressure to be resolved, that it's almost in that space and in your spirit, there's a lot of clarity for this information to be coming in, but to also be unfolding and going deeper and feeding you a bit of deeper insight and on you and also on your child, so that the sensitive energy, the subtle energy, can actually integrate into our very concrete energy, our actions, our confidence, our choices that we make, And so there's a wonderful feeling of just creating a space for everything to kind of be allowed to stand together and to take it in on that level before we go into the deeper level of okay, well, what consequences is it causing? What feelings is it causing? What course of action is it looking for? So that, I think, feels like our reading is complete for today. Please let me know if anything in it resonated with you, if you enjoyed it, if you like the style, or if you've got any topics that you would like us to explore in mother and child card readings. So feel free to like, share and subscribe, and know that I post a couple of times a week, and there are also other series on my channel where you can have a look at maybe deeper contemplations or looking into conversations around behavior with our children. And if you'd like a private reading, please feel encouraged to look in the description box where you'll find my email, and that's where you can connect with me for a more in-depth reading around either yourself or in your family, or, you know, the greater picture. So lots of love till the next time. I hope you have a beautiful day, week, and I look forward to seeing you again.